My family thought they had ruined my life the night they forced me to leave everything behind. My father told me I was a disappointment. My mother said I had embarrassed the family. My older brother laughed when I told them I would be fine. They took away the family business opportunity I had spent years preparing for, canceled my apartment lease, cut me off financially, and told everyone I had failed. What they didn't know was that their decision would accidentally make me rich. Because the moment they pushed me out, I stopped trying to prove myself to them. I took the tiny amount of money I had left, accepted a job nobody in my family respected, and started investing everything I earned into a company my father had once called a stupid little startup. 7 years later, that startup was worth more than the family business. And when my family finally discovered who owned the largest share, they realized the person they thought they had destroyed had quietly become the wealthiest person in the room. My name is Nathan Carter, and growing up, I believed my family's business would eventually become mine. My father, Richard Carter, owned a regional logistics company in Ohio. Carter Freight wasn't a massive corporation, but it was successful. It had about 70 employees. We operated warehouses across 3 cities. We had dozens of trucks. And my father had spent almost 30 years building the company. My older brother, Brandon, was supposed to take over. Everyone knew it. My father had told relatives. He had told employees. He had told business partners. He even had a framed photograph in his office of Brandon standing beside him with the words, "Future CEO," written underneath. There was one problem. Brandon didn't care about the company. He cared about looking like he cared. He loved expensive cars. He loved restaurants. He loved showing people how successful he was. But he hated paperwork. He hated spreadsheets. He hated dealing with employees. And he absolutely hated waking up before 8 in the morning. I was the opposite. I started working at Carter Freight when I was 18. I began in the warehouse. I loaded boxes. I cleaned trucks. I worked night shifts. I learned every part of the business. By 23, I was managing one of the smaller warehouses. By 25, I was overseeing operations across 3 locations. I knew the employees. I knew the customers. I knew where the company was wasting money. And I knew exactly how to make it more efficient. My father noticed. But instead of being proud, he became uncomfortable. One day, he called me into his office. He said, "You need to stop acting like you're running this company." I was confused. "I manage operations." "You manage what I tell you to manage." I nodded. "Okay." He leaned back. "Brandon is going to be taking over eventually." I said, "I know." "Then you need to understand your role." I asked, "What is my role?" He said, "Supporting your brother." I stared at him. Even when he's making bad decisions. My father's expression changed. "What did you say?" I immediately knew I had crossed a line. I said, "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Brandon had already made several expensive mistakes. He had signed a bad contract with a trucking supplier. He had purchased equipment the company didn't need. He had hired friends into management positions. He had lost 2 major clients because of poor communication. And my father kept covering for him. Whenever I pointed out the numbers, my father told me to stop criticizing my brother. I eventually stopped. I focused on my own work. Then I discovered something. One of our warehouses was consistently losing money. The problem wasn't the warehouse itself. The problem was outdated routing software. Our drivers were wasting thousands of hours every year because routes were being planned manually. I started researching logistics technology. I found a small startup called Route Pilot. It had developed an AA-powered routing system that could optimize delivery schedules. The company was tiny. It had fewer than 10 employees. But I could see the potential. I contacted the founder. His name was Alex Morno. We spoke for almost 2 hours. I told him about the problems I was seeing in the logistics industry. He told me about the technology they were developing. I became fascinated. I wanted Carter Freight to test it. I brought the proposal to my father. He looked at the presentation for less than 5 minutes. Then he threw it on the desk. Absolutely not. I asked why. Because we're a trucking company, not a technology company. It could save us hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not interested. I tried again. Just let us test it at one warehouse. He shook his head. Stop wasting your time. I left his office frustrated. But I didn't give up. I started investing my own money into Route Pilot. Not much. At first, only $5,000. Then another $10,000. Alex and I stayed in contact. I helped him understand the logistics industry. He gave me early access to the software. I started using it for small side projects. The results were incredible. Delivery times dropped. Fuel costs fell. Driver efficiency improved. I knew we had something. But my family didn't care. Then came the event that changed everything. My father decided to retire. He announced it during a family dinner. He said, "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations." Everyone applauded. Then he looked at Brandon. "Your brother is ready." Brandon smiled. I didn't say anything. After dinner, my father asked me to stay. He said, "I want you to work with Brandon during the transition." I asked, "Doing what?" "Operations." "Will I have authority?" He paused. "Brandon will make the final decisions." I nodded. "And what happens to my position?" He said, "You'll remain operations director." I looked at him. "Under Brandon?" "Yes." I said, "Dad, that's not a transition. That's a demotion." He became angry. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything. You've always been jealous of your brother." I stared at him. "That's not true." "Then prove it." I said, "How?" "Support him." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe he was saying it. I've supported him for years. My father stood. "Then support him now." The next morning, I resigned. I didn't plan to. But I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my career watching someone destroy a company while I was expected to stay silent. I told my father. He looked disappointed. Then he said, "If you leave now, don't expect to come back." I replied, "Okay." He didn't believe me. Neither did Brandon. Brandon laughed when he heard. "You'll be back." I said, "Maybe." He smiled. "You can't make it without Dad." I didn't answer. My mother called me that night. She cried. She said I was destroying the family. I told her I wasn't destroying anything. I was leaving a job. She said, "Your father is giving the business to Brandon." I said, "I know." "You're going to regret this." I said, "Maybe." She asked, "What will you do?" I looked at the Route Pilot investment documents on my desk. I said, "Something different." She laughed. "Don't throw away your future." I almost told her. I almost told her I had invested in a technology company. I almost told her that Alex believed it could transform logistics. But I didn't. I simply said goodbye. The first 6 months after leaving Carter Freight were terrifying. I had no salary. I had savings, but not enough to live comfortably for long. I moved into a smaller apartment. I sold my car. I cut my expenses. And I joined Route Pilot as an advisor. Alex couldn't afford to pay me much. But I didn't care. I believed in the company. We worked constantly. We improved the software. We found customers. Small delivery companies started using it, then medium-sized companies, then regional logistics companies. Within 18 months, Route Pilot had become profitable. Then something huge happened. A national retailer contacted us. They wanted to use our technology across their delivery network. The contract was worth millions. The company suddenly became valuable. Investors came. I received offers to sell my shares. I refused. I believed the company could become much bigger. My father didn't know any of this. My mother occasionally called. She always asked the same question. "How are you doing?" I always answered, "I'm fine." She never asked for details. Then Brandon started making mistakes at Carter Freight. I heard about them through former employees. He had taken on too much debt. He had expanded too quickly. He had purchased new trucks without enough contracts. He had fired experienced managers. Several major clients left. The company's profits collapsed. My father came out of retirement. He tried to fix things, but the damage was already done. I wanted to help. I really did. But I remembered my father's words. "If you leave now, don't expect to come back." So I stayed away. Then, 3 years after I left, Route Pilot received a massive acquisition offer. A major technology company wanted to buy us. The offer was enormous. Alex called me. "We could sell." I asked, "Do you want to?" He said, "I don't know." I told him, "Then don't." We rejected the offer. That decision changed everything. Instead of selling, we raised another round of funding. Our valuation increased dramatically. I became one of the largest individual shareholders. I still lived modestly. I still drove an ordinary car. I didn't post about my wealth. I didn't tell my family. I didn't want them to know. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to see whether they would ever care about me without knowing what I had. Then, in the 5th year, everything exploded. Route Pilot signed contracts with several of the largest logistics companies in the country. Our technology became standard across thousands of deliveries. Revenue multiplied. Investors valued the company at hundreds of millions. My shares were suddenly worth more money than I had ever imagined. I became rich. Very rich. But my lifestyle barely changed. I bought a beautiful house. I invested in other businesses. I hired a financial advisor. I created a foundation. But I didn't buy exotic cars. I didn't throw parties. I didn't tell my family. Then one morning, my phone rang. It was my father. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a year. I answered. "Hi, Dad." He didn't say hello. He said, "We have a problem." I immediately knew what he meant. Carter Freight was in trouble. The company was drowning in debt. My father had already sold 2 warehouses. Brandon had stepped away. Employees were leaving. The bank was demanding repayment. My father asked me to meet him. I agreed. We met at a restaurant. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He said, "I made a mistake." I didn't respond. He continued, "I should have listened to you." I looked at him. He said, "Brandon wasn't ready." I said, "I knew that." He nodded. "I know." Then he said something unexpected. "I'm proud of you." I looked away. Those words used to mean everything. Now they felt strangely empty. I asked, "Why are you telling me this?" He hesitated. "Because I need your help." There it was. I asked, "How much?" He gave me the number. It was a lot, but I could afford it. I could have written the check immediately. Instead, I asked, "What happened to the company?" He explained everything. I listened. Then I said, "I can help." His eyes widened. "Really?" Yes. He looked relieved. Then I added, but not by giving you money. His expression changed. What? I'll invest. He stared at me. What does that mean? I'll buy a controlling interest. He looked shocked. In Carter Freight. Yes. He laughed nervously. That's impossible. Why? Because you don't have that kind of money. I smiled. Are you sure? He stared at me. I took out my phone. I showed him the financial documents. Not my bank account. Not everything. Just enough. My investments. My ownership stake in Route Pilot. My net worth. My father's face changed. He looked at the numbers. Then he looked at me. You own that much of Route Pilot? Yes. He stared. The company everyone is talking about. Yes. He whispered, that's your company. I'm one of the founders and largest shareholders. He sat back. I could see memories running through his mind. The night I resigned. The night he told me I couldn't succeed without him. The moment Brandon laughed. My mother's warning. Everything. Then my father asked the question I knew was coming. How much is it worth? I told him. He went completely silent. Carter Freight was worth a fraction of that. The company my father had spent 30 years building was smaller than the company I had helped build after he pushed me away. My father looked at me. You're rich. I laughed. I do okay. He shook his head. No, you're rich. I didn't answer. He asked, why didn't you tell us? I looked at him. Would it have changed anything? He didn't respond. I continued. When I left, you thought I was a failure. He looked down. You didn't believe in me. I was wrong. You told me I couldn't come back. He closed his eyes. I know. And now you're asking me to buy the company. He looked at me. Yes. I sat back. That's the irony. He asked, what irony? I smiled. You thought you ruined my life. My father looked confused. I continued. When you pushed me out, I stopped trying to build the life you wanted. I pointed toward him. I stopped trying to become the person you expected. Then I pointed toward myself. And I became the person I wanted to be. My father started crying. I had never seen him cry over me. Not when I left. Not when I struggled. Not when I graduated. But now he was crying. He said, I didn't know. I said, you never asked. That sentence destroyed him. I decided to buy Carter Freight. But I did it on my terms. I bought enough of the company to control the business. I paid off the most dangerous debts. I kept experienced employees. I sold unnecessary assets. And I brought in professional management. Brandon was not part of it. He asked to meet me. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a conference room. He looked uncomfortable. He said, so you're the boss now? I smiled. Apparently. He laughed. Dad must hate that. I said, he doesn't. Brandon looked down. Then he said, I was wrong about you. I didn't respond. He continued. I thought you were jealous. I wasn't. I know. He looked at me. You really built all that? Yes. He laughed. That's crazy. I asked, do you want a job? He looked surprised. You'd hire me. I didn't say I'd give you a management position. He laughed. Fair. I told him he could work in the warehouse. He stared at me. Seriously. Everyone starts somewhere. He looked embarrassed. But he accepted. For the first time in his life, Brandon had to earn his position. And strangely, it changed him. He started showing up early. He listened to employees. He learned the business. He stopped buying things to impress people. He became more responsible. My relationship with him slowly improved. My mother was different. She had always been softer. She came to my house one weekend. She stood in the living room looking around. She saw photographs, awards, books, the company magazine with my picture on the cover. She touched one of the photographs. "Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "I didn't think you'd care." She started crying. Of course I cared. I looked at her. "Mom, when I was 25, you told me I was throwing away my future." She wiped her eyes. "I know. You told me Dad would never forgive me." "I know. You told me Brandon was the one who deserved the company." She nodded. I asked, what was I supposed to think? She had no answer. Then she said, "I was wrong." I hugged her. Not because everything was forgotten. Because I didn't want to spend my life angry. Over the next year, I rebuilt Carter Freight. I integrated some of Route Pilot's technology. We improved routing. We reduced fuel costs. We automated warehouse management. The company became profitable again. My father stayed, involved as an advisor. He no longer made every decision. He learned to listen. One day, he came to my office. He looked at the new company logo. Then he smiled. "You know what bothers me?" I asked, "What?" He said, "I spent 30 years building this." I nodded. "And you fixed it in 2." I laughed. "Not exactly." He smiled. Then he said, "I think I finally understand something." "What?" "You weren't trying to replace me." I looked at him. "No. You were trying to build something." "Yes. And I was so afraid of losing control that I pushed you away." I nodded. He said, "I'm sorry." This time, the apology felt different. Because he wasn't apologizing for needing my money. He was apologizing for not believing in me. I accepted it. Years later, I still think about the night my family thought they had ruined my life. I remember my father telling me I was a disappointment. I remember my mother crying. I remember Brandon laughing. I remember walking out with a suitcase. At the time, I thought it was the worst night of my life. Now, I think it was the night my life actually began. If they hadn't pushed me out, I probably would have stayed at Carter Freight. I probably would have spent years working under Brandon. I probably would have kept trying to earn my father's approval. I probably never would have met Alex. I never would have invested in Route Pilot. I never would have built the company that changed my life. And I certainly wouldn't have become financially independent. My family thought they had destroyed my future. They accidentally removed the biggest obstacle standing between me and it. The strangest part is that I never wanted revenge. I didn't want my family to fail. I didn't want Brandon to lose everything. I didn't want my father to regret his choices. I simply wanted to be free. And once I was free, I discovered what I could do. That's the lesson I wish I could give my younger self. Sometimes rejection feels like punishment. Sometimes losing the opportunity you thought you needed is actually the beginning of something better. Sometimes the people who tell you that you're not good enough are simply people who cannot imagine the version of you that exists outside their expectations. My family thought they ruined my life. They thought I had thrown away my future. They thought I would eventually come crawling back. Instead, I built a company. I became a major investor. I became wealthy. And eventually, I bought the business they once told me I wasn't good enough to inherit. But the biggest victory wasn't the money. It wasn't buying Carter Freight. It wasn't seeing my father realize he had underestimated me. It wasn't watching Brandon finally respect me. The biggest victory was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer needed any of them to tell me I had succeeded. I already knew. The boy who had once stood in his father's office begging for one chance had become a man who could create his own opportunities. The son they thought had failed became the person who saved the company. The brother they underestimated became the one Brandon eventually came to respect. And the family that thought they had ruined my life accidentally gave me the freedom to build a better one.